You're with Julian on the Brownout, and I think I'll get into this. The last track I'm playing on the show is Neil Young, funnily enough, today. So I couldn't really not comment on the most prominently he's been engaged in a 24-hour news cycle for an awful long time. Neil Young's probably my all-time favourite artist, maybe alongside Bowie and Nina Simone. And I am an in-depth fan, and I did feature his new album recently, and there's a YouTube documentary of the making of it, which is charming. He's got into this massive battle with Spotify and Joe Rogan, and I love him for it. If you don't know who Neil Young is, he has been famously cantankerous his whole career. When he at the start of the 70s, he recorded a solo album, Harvest, and a Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young album called, I can't remember what it's, Deja Vu. They both sold like 8 million copies, and he was probably the biggest star in the world in that year. He had two of the biggest selling albums that year in America, and famously headed for the ditch and made a lot of very uncompromising dark music, which is now regarded as the greatest period of his career. On the Beach, Time Fades Away, Tonight's the Night. Just ran from being a commercial artist into this music, which has latently, in the years that followed, become incredibly acclaimed music throughout the 70s. And then he did it again at the end of the 70s by spending the entire 1980s making terrible music, willfully bad, deliberately unrepresentative, to the point where he was famously sued by his record label, David Geffen, for making unrepresentative music. Some wag pointed out, him making unrepresentative music is making representative music, because that's what he's done his whole career. But those albums were bad. And then just reinventing himself at the end of the 80s, he came back with Freedom, one of his best albums, and then was suddenly anointed the godfather of grunge by the likes of Nirvana, and suddenly became huge again. But he's always been this hugely cantankerous figure, and willfully so. So the fact that he would choose for no reason to take on Joe Rogan. So Joe Rogan's $100 million Spotify exclusive podcast is the world's biggest. And Neil Young said, because of his COVID disinformation, I'm going to remove my music from Spotify, to be followed by Joan Baez and Nils Lofgren, and no doubt others will join him. And others have pointed out he sold half his music catalogue for $150 million. He can afford to do what he wants. Other people can't, and so on. But the point is this, people are really moaning that this is censorship. And it is not censorship, because you have a right to choose who you stand next to. Now, you can only claim this is censorship if you thought there was any way on earth that Neil Young removing his music from Spotify was a big enough threat to remove a $100 million podcast. Neil Young would have never expected Spotify to do that. He was making a very public stance that is... so Joe Rogan's show, I've got no problem with Joe Rogan, but the problem with his show is that he crosses boundaries sometimes and then apologises and saying, I got this wrong or I got that wrong. But a section of his audience is brotastic, and they go for confirmation bias. So when they hear him saying something that they want to believe, they listen. And when he retracts it and apologises, they don't. So the potential for him on such a vast environment and such a wide listenership to promote falsehoods about COVID has drawn the ire of Neil Young. I would like to point out that Neil Young got polio as a child and had to learn to walk again, and has suffered the effects of it for the rest of his life. So he might have some skin in the game when it comes to vaccines. And the other thing is that Neil Young's two children, both adults now, were born severely disabled. And he has run the Bridge concert for about 30 years for people. I don't know if it was cerebral palsy or what they have, but they've been in wheelchairs since children and need constant, round-the-clock care. So are susceptible more than average people to dying from illnesses like COVID. So he has some personal skin in the game when it comes to COVID. So I think, but most of all, I just like the fact that he would stand up. And he would stand up and be honourable. I don't want Joe Rogan cancelled. I like the fact that there's more publicity gone to the fact that there's a lot of stuff on his show which, he should be allowed to broadcast what he wants, as far as I'm concerned. I'm someone that can listen to Joe Rogan and not have my medical advice from him. The trouble is that some of his audience get it from him. So that's where it's a problem. So he's come back, Joe Rogan's come back and said, Spotify are putting a disclaimer on any of my shows that relate to COVID, and I welcome this. He has not responded in a negative way at all. Lots of people are saying that Spotify's lost 4 billion of their share value. I love the fact that it's spiraling and that Neil Young's done this. But the whole reason I brought this up is that it's worth, like Joe Rogan's fans are saying, who the hell is Neil Young? He's irrelevant. And I can't play this on YouTube, but I am going to play it on the radio. If I wanted to quantify Neil Young's worth, I would play this song, Thrasher. For me, Neil Young is one of the great singer-songwriters of all time and one of the most interesting personalities to have ever made music. He's always ploughed his own way, and even if it's cost him dearly, he just doesn't care. And I love that about him. I love the fact he stood so steadfast. He wrote an album, Let's Impeach the President, when George Bush was in power. And he has a very rural tinge to him that leans towards having a conservative base, but he throws left-wing politics at them like Molotov cocktails, which is wonderful. So I would play this song because it's one man. And yeah, if you're on the YouTube channel, just I'll try and put it in a playlist or something. Just one man on stage with a guitar, and the words and how they emotionally build for me over the course of the song. That's worth, for me. That is the worth of a person existing. There's no studio version. This is the studio version, live on stage. This is Thrasher. Adios.